Welcome, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening. This is being hosted by the Winston County Self-Help Association and the Mississippi Minority Farmers Alliance. They're teaming up with the National Center for Appropriate Technology to bring you soil health one-on-one. We're going to have 3 series, meaning it would be 3 times we would do this webinar starting this evening, as well as 2 more Tuesdays back to back, February 1st and February 8th at 6 p.m. pertaining to soil health. So this evening, we have my co-worker. She's a sustainable ag specialist out of the Fayetteville, Arkansas office, and she knows soil, everything about soil health, to be able to assist us with our soil and understanding what it means to have good soil and how to remedy some of the things and the issues we have going on with our property. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Nina Prater.
Thank you, Felicia. I'm so excited to be here with you all tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. As Felicia said, soil is my passion, and I hope to introduce you to just some of the basic principles of understanding soil and what it is and how we can work with it to make our farms successful ventures. So let me go ahead and start my presentation. So I'm going to be talking about soil health generally, with a little bit of a focus on livestock production, but this will be applicable no matter what kind of operation you have, because soil is universal. So whether you're a livestock producer or not, you'll hopefully get plenty of good information out of my talk tonight. So just to tell you a little bit about myself and my background, I've been a soil specialist with NCAT since 2016, and I live in Cedarville, Arkansas, which is near Fayetteville, and my husband and I have a farm where we raise cattle and meat goats. That is a picture of me with one of our baby goats, and it's a family operation that has been in his family since the 1960s. But in 2010, he and I came on to help implement rotational grazing systems and things like that. So we've seen a lot of changes just in the past 12 years to the farm. So I get to, talk about soil in my work with NCAT, and then I get to go home and try and put these practices into action on the farm. So that's just a little bit about my background and experience. So let's just start with a really basic question. What is soil? What are we talking about? What is under the ground? It's something that is everywhere, but we don't necessarily think that much about what it's made up of. So this pie chart that you can see, it's what's in every soil textbook. There's about 45% of the soil is like the mineral particles that most people think of as soil. That's the sand, silt, and clay particles that are just eroded from the bedrock over thousands and thousands of years. So that's one component of the soil. And then about 5%, depending on where you are, of the soil is soil organic matter. And by soil organic matter, I mean everything that is alive or was alive in the soil. So plant matter, fungal matter, and all of those little critters that you can see on the other side of the screen. All of that, whether it's alive or decomposing, is considered soil organic matter. And it only makes up about 5% of the total soil, but it is hugely critical, and I'll be spending a lot of time talking about that portion of the soil because it has a huge impact on how well your soil functions. And then the other half of soil is just space. It's like the empty rooms of the house. It's air space where air can flow in and out of the soil. so that these soil organisms can function. And sometimes it's saturated with water. So it's your pore space for air and water is about half of your soil. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this layer of productive soil on the top of the bedrock that we all have to work with. It's this vibrant living thing that has a community of life within it. But about half of it is pore space, and that's incredibly important too. And then you've got the mineral and the organic matter that works together in the other half. And that's just a very general description of what is soil. Now, what is soil health? For a long time, people didn't talk about soil health. They talked about maybe soil type or soil quality. If you go to NRCS and they look up on a soil map where your farm is located, they can tell you your soil type and give you a general understanding of what it is probably generally like, its characteristics. But that's not going to tell you how healthy your soil is. As we've come to understand better and better the biological aspect of soil, people have realized that soil really is this vibrant living ecosystem that can be healthy or unhealthy. So I used that diagram again with the tree at the top to show that it really is this ecosystem, with predators and prey and the plants feeding, photosynthesized energy into the ecosystem. It's really exciting. I wish, there were some better nature documentaries about the exciting activity that goes on under the soil. And it's through all that functioning that we build soil structure. In the photo of the two hands that you can see, this is the same soil type, but the one circled in green is the one that has good soil health. You can see the loose, crumbly structure and the roots sticking out. It looks like a soil that could allow rainwater to enter it. It looks like a soil that can allow roots to go through it. And the soil that's circled in the orange circle, it's the same soil type. It started out the same as the other soil, but through management, it's become this compacted block that really isn't functioning well as a soil. And so our activities on the land has a huge impact on this soil over time. You may not damage the soil with the farming activities in 1 year, but over many, many years, it adds up. And so just kind of like, I like to use human health as an analogy. You can eat really bad junk food for 1 day and your body can recover. But if you eat junk food all the time, your body's going to suffer. And then conversely, if you decide, you know what, I'm going to change my ways, I'm going to eat really healthy. You can't just do it for 1 day. You have to do it over time and build up your health back. So I think thinking about soil health and human health as sort of analogous is a good way to think about how to keep soil functioning healthy. We have to treat it as this living thing, because it is, and treat it like that. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about soil health. How well is it functioning? And to build soil health on our farms, we have to look to nature to figure out how to do that, because nature built all of these soils in the first place. The planet wasn't created with all these, lush terrain with prairie and everything. All of that evolved over time, and it evolved with these ecosystems that built soil. So people have come up with these 5 soil health principles. Some people use 4, some people say 6, but I think 5 is a happy medium. these 5 soil health principles, and they're all modeled after natural processes of soil building. So the 5 are minimize disturbance, and I'll go over all of these in detail in a minute, but I just wanted to review them here. Minimize disturbance to the soil, maximize biodiversity on the land, keep the soil covered at all times, keep living roots growing in the soil as much of the year as possible, and then include animals in the farming system. And you have to be careful with that one because animals can cause damage to an agricultural system if overgrazing is a chronic problem. But animals can be an incredibly powerful tool to build soil through if you use regenerative grazing practices. So that's one that we'll talk a little bit more about later. But I really wanted to emphasize the power of plant roots in the soil building process. So one thing that people often don't know about plants is that, you know, we all know they photosynthesize. They take the energy from the sun and create sugars that they use to build their own plant parts, their leaves, their stems, the roots, the flowers, the seeds, all of that. So that's what they do with those sugars that they create through photosynthesis. But they also exude about 30 to 50% of what they create into the soil to feed that soil food web that I showed pictures of earlier. So plants are like pumping the soil full of sugars while they're functioning and growing. So because it benefits them, they want a happy environment for their roots. So they're constantly feeding these soil microorganisms to alter the soil environment to be a good place for them to grow. So plants are incredibly powerful soil builders. They're what makes it, you know, fertile and productive. So the power of plants, I'm going to talk about that a lot, but I wanted to state it up front here and explain how they do that. So when I talk about minimizing disturbance in the soil, that means both physical disturbance like tillage or chemical disturbance like the additions of pesticides or chemical fertilizers. So both of those things disrupt the soil ecosystem in different ways. On a livestock farm, one of the disturbances is grazing, but it's not necessarily negative. It can be a positive disturbance if used carefully. You just have to make sure it's an appropriate level of disturbance because the cattle come through, they graze, they remove some material, and hopefully then they move on and graze another area to allow the land to have time to recover. An example I use of ways that farmers can minimize chemical disturbance on their operation is before my husband and I moved back, we didn't really have any farming experience. So we were learning from his grandparents and how they do things. But we were also bringing like fresh eyes to the operation. And every time they worked the cattle through, and every like 6 months or so, they would just automatically use chemical dewormer, which was pretty expensive, just because they thought that's what they needed to do to keep their animals healthy. And we had read somewhere that these dewormers impact your dung beetle populations. And so we thought, well, do the cows have a worm problem? Let's test first. And if they do, then we'll use it. But if they don't, then we won't. And we'll see how long we can go without using chemical dewormer. So we stopped using it and we tested. We didn't need it. The cows were fine. And then pretty soon, I don't know how soon, but within a year, we had growing dung beetle populations. One of these pictures is a cow pie. And all those little holes in it are holes that dung beetles made. And so if you see that out on your pastures, that's a good sign because dung beetles take that cow pie, they dry it out. Some of them bury the dung into the soil, so it's really speeding up the nutrient cycling in your pasture, which just makes your grass grow that much faster. And and it also reduces your fly problem because the cow pie dries out faster and is distributed faster. And so the fly larvae don't have time to breed as much in those cow pies. So we eliminated a chemical disturbance. We allowed a natural process, dung beetles, to help us cycle nutrients, and we eliminated a pest problem with the flies. I mean, reduced, not eliminated. So that's just one small example I like to show of how looking at the whole system and including the soil in that picture can really improve things on your farm. The much prettier picture I have with the cattle and the clover in the front is an example of how we can minimize chemical disturbance also. If you apply nitrogen to your soil, chemical nitrogen to your soil repeatedly, it actually decreases the amount of soil organic matter over time that you have in your soil. And it does this because when you add nitrogen to the soil, all the soil microbes get really excited because that had been the limiting factor. All of a sudden they have all this nitrogen and they're able to consume a lot more organic matter, which is then released into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So you're losing soil organic matter when you apply nitrogen fertilizer. But in pasture systems, we have a really excellent way of adding nitrogen to the system that doesn't cause all of that disturbance. And that is legumes, which are fixed nitrogen from the atmosphere and add it into your soil system over time. So that's another way you can design your operation to be fertile, to be productive, to give your cows lots of variety to eat by adding legumes, that builds soil health. So that's some livestock examples of that soil health principle. The next soil health principle is maximize biodiversity. So that's having as many different kinds of things growing on your land as possible. And when you have really a lot of diversity in your pasture, they're much more resilient to weather extremes, and they're much more productive. These plants can fill different niches, cool season plants, warm season plants, plants that thrive in drought, plants that thrive in wet weather. So if you've got a variety of plants in your pasture, you can really maximize your productivity and weather the storms that will come your way much better off. And then also a diverse diet for your livestock is really beneficial to their health. So this is kind of a tough one that we struggle with on our farm because we have a lot of Bermuda grass and it really outcompetes a lot of native grasses and things like that. But we're always struggling and experimenting and trying new things of ways of seeding other kinds of plants into the pasture. And another way to maximize biodiversity is through careful grazing management, so that they don't overgraze their favorites, and then all that's left over in your pasture is their less preferred plant species. So there's a lot of ways you can maximize biodiversity, and it really will help your soil thrive. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention was in the soil, different plants support different soil microbes. So if you have diversity above ground, you'll have diversity below ground too. And that is important for all of the same reasons I said before, of functioning through different weather extremes. So you want a lot of soil microbes in the soil, cycling nutrients so that your plants are getting the nutrients they need, no matter what the conditions are. Another really important soil health principle is to keep the soil covered. It protects it from wind erosion, from rain runoff, and from temperature extremes. We all, when it's really hot out, we all seek shade to be comfortable in the sun. We don't like to be out exposed in that hot weather, and soil microbes are not that much different from us. They have a temperature range kind of like ours that they function best in, and so we want to give them tall grass so that they're shaded at all times, so the soil doesn't get too hot. Especially here in the South, this is a really important principle. And in pasture systems, people often look out across a pasture, like in this picture with the cow. They'd see, well, that pasture is covered. It has plants on it. But you can see throughout there's spaces where it's bare ground. That is a very overgrazed pasture. And it's not covered. If you can walk out into the middle of your pasture and look straight down and see dirt, it's not covered. So you really need taller grasses and maybe build up a thatch to really keep that soil protected. And then keeping living roots growing in the soil as much of the year as possible. This goes back to that capturing the solar energy and pumping it into your soil. Solar energy into the soil. That's a tongue twister. I mean, if we can capture it from the earliest, part of spring to the, keep the shoulders of the seasons, keep something growing. That way you'll just really be able to grab all of that energy and get it into the soil where it belongs. So in pasture systems, that's, cool season crops, warm season crops, cool season, not crops, pasture plants. So that even in the fall and spring, you'll have something green there growing. And that will really, the more you can enrich your soil with this free, resource, the better. Just get greedy for that solar energy and get it into the soil. And then include animals. Not everybody includes this as a soil health principle. NRCS lumps it in with the maximize biodiversity because not everybody is able to include livestock in their farming operation. But if you can, it can really help. It increases the rate of nutrient cycling. So if you just had a pasture and didn't graze it, the nutrients wouldn't cycle through from the living plant back into the soil again as quickly. But cattle grazing and then depositing their manure and urine onto the pasture really helps speed that up. So they can really help increase the rate of soil building if you're using it well. And then if you include animals in a managed grazing system, it can help maintain the diversity of your pasture. They can help eat down the woody stuff. If you didn't have any animals there, it might get taken over by woody plants. We've all seen pastures on neighbors' farms where they've taken the animals off and just left it if they weren't able to farm anymore. And you could, in a few years, start to see trees starting to sprout up in there. So cattle can graze that down and keep it into a nice grassy environment and keep the diversity in the pasture. And then animals are really perfect for marginal land where you can't grow, row crops or specialty crops. If the soil is too shallow or too sloped and you don't want to till it for these cropping systems, like on our farm, it's on a hilltop. I would be so afraid to till it up because it just washed down the hill. So you can graze that land, though it can still grow grass. It might not be able to grow soybeans, but it can grow grass. And so you can get income by raising animals on that land. So there's a lot of benefits to including animals when you're working on building your soil's health. Okay, so I've just shared with you these powerful soil health building principles. So now what? What's the next step? I would say learn as much about these principles, about soil as you can. You're not gonna, I can't impart everything I would like to in this one presentation, but the more you can learn about it, the better. And ATTRA has tons of great resources on soil and on forage production and things like that. We've got great podcasts and everything. Just steep yourself in this subject, and then start to observe your farm. I would say, spend time just watching and seeing how it looks. Go out on your farm when it's raining and see what happens to the water on your farm. Does it infiltrate into the soil or does it run off? Watch your livestock if you've got livestock already. Where do they travel throughout the day? Do they travel the same paths all the time? Are they hiding out in the shade or hiding out from the wind in certain places all the time, so the nutrients are all being deposited in that one spot all the time? Just observe the patterns that are on your operation now, and then start thinking about the two things together. What small changes can you make now to get the ball rolling? Most farmers that I know don't have unlimited funds to make all the changes they would like to at one time. But you might be able to run one cross fence on your farm so that you can rotate your cows or whatever livestock, sheep, goats, from one pasture one day or 1 week, and then move them to the other pasture the other week to allow some rest time in your pasture. Pastures really need rest, and to allow the plants to recover, to allow the soil to recover. And so, maybe you can make one small change or add another watering tank so that you're giving the animals two options to get water from instead of one. There's probably little changes you can make, or just like that little change that we made with the chemical dewormer on the farm. Like, that was a really small change that we made. It saved us money. We didn't have to go out and buy this expensive chemical, and it eliminated a disturbance. So just look at your operation with fresh eyes and see if there's anything you can add or maybe take away to start building positive change. And then constantly, as you move through the seasons, monitor what's going on. Are your actions making things better, or are they making things worse? And then as you see those changes, adjust your course. It's not a set it and forget it type thing with farming. You just constantly have to be monitoring and adjusting. On our farm, I think my grandfather-in-law had a certain number of cows in his head that he had to have on the farm at all times to be, a successful operation. And, we came on board and worked with that and implemented rotational grazing, saw what changes that made. And over time, we thought, you know what, I think we're overstocked. And so we've slowly been adjusting that down and experimenting. And it's always an experiment. We never know the right answer until we watch it for a little longer, see how it works. It's just always a process, and really using your powers of observation and a willingness to experiment a little bit here and there will really help you hone in on your soil, on your soil health and your farm's health and your farm's profitability. and then keep building towards this soil health focused system. As farmers, we have to make money, but we won't be able to in the long run if we degrade our soil. And so it's really building your own foundation for success if you build a healthy soil. So those are some actions I would suggest you go forward with, just as you keep working on this. In terms of observations to your soil, there's a whole bunch of on-farm soil assessments that you can do to really learn your soil and see if you're making progress over the years. Like I said at the beginning, soil health is very much like human health. It takes time to build up your soil's health. Just like if I decided today that I was going to run a marathon, it would take me a really long time to get there. It would be a process, but it could happen over time if I worked toward that goal. And with soil health, you have to just build toward it slowly. It's a living system, and you need to keep building it up gradually. So some of these changes might not happen immediately, but if you went out to your pasture now and dug 1 cubic foot of soil out and just looked at it, what's the structure? Is it loose and crumbly, or is it really hard? Is there a compacted layer? What color is it? Is it dark or is it light? The darker the soil, generally the healthier the soil. Is it really red? That might mean you've lost some topsoil. How deep do the roots go down? Are there a lot of earthworms? Are there any earthworms? Earthworms are a good sign. The more, the better. And you can also do soil testing. I always think it's good to get that as a baseline, so you understand the soil nutrients that are there, your soil's pH. Some labs do, if you can request them to do your soil's organic matter percentage, that's a really good number because you want to keep building that up over time. So those are some observations you can make about your soil so that you can become your own expert on your farm's situation. Because I can tell you generally some information about soil, but I don't know what your farm is like, and so you have to really become your own expert on your farm. And there is no one right way to do this. There's these 5 guiding principles, but there are an infinite number of practices you can use to put them into place. So whatever type of livestock you're raising, you can still follow these principles. Or if you're raising specialty crops or field row crops, these principles still apply. And unfortunately, you can't just pick one principle and follow it. They really work together. You might focus on one year, but you really have to implement them all in order for it to really build your soil's health. And then as you start the ball rolling, it'll just build up like a snowball rolling down a hill. Your successes will lead to more successes. As your soil health gets a little bit better, then it will be able to infiltrate more water. Then your plants will be able to grow a little bit longer through the drought and add a little bit more of that, those sugars into the soil to feed the soil food web. And it'll just keep building up and building up until you'll have that loose, crumbly soil that you can see circled in green there. Your successes build on each other until you have achieved the soil health goals that you're working towards. And that will lead to, healthy livestock, healthy plants, healthy productivity, and hopefully a happier farmer as well, and better profitability. So to regenerate soil health, there's just some overall guiding thoughts I wanted to leave you with. And one is, we cannot keep taking more than we give back from the soil. It's throughout the history of this country, we keep taking more out of the soil than we give back. But we need to start returning more to the soil than we take to make up for all those losses. It's just like a bank account. You can't keep withdrawing and withdrawing without adding something back in, and pretty soon you'll be in the red. So it's the same with soil. Unfortunately, for centuries now, we've been taking too much from the soil, and we need to give back now if we want to have healthy soil. And I think we need to change how we define success so that it includes promoting soil health. You know, there's a lot of different ways you can define success in farming. Profitability is an important one, but it's not the only one. You have to be profitable and have healthy soil. You know, having an organic label is a great success, and you know, hopefully through that certification process, you will be implementing soil health practices. You know, just having a cool farm Instagram account with lots of likes, that's great. Do it, promote your farm. But you also have to have healthy soil. That's really critical to the success of your farm. And then we have to learn all of these different ways that we can give back to the soil through our agricultural practices. We have incredible power to make positive change on our farms and to turn our soils into those beautiful, dark, well-structured, productive soils that infiltrate rainwater, that produce tons of grass, that support our livestock, that support our farm business. And we have to learn all of those different, all the different practices that we can to give back to the soil. And I think that people are developing different ways to do this all the time. You know, the world of, you know, managed grazing is we're constantly learning more and more about it. And I think that the more we learn about how to capture all that sunlight and that rainwater to give to the soil, the more different ways we can nurture the soil, the better land stewards that we'll be. So if I know I threw a lot at you, and you may have all kinds of questions for me. I'm happy to answer them now. And then if nobody has any questions for me, I have one for you, as you can see on the page. But I'm happy to answer just basic soil questions. If there's some term you've heard at some point that you've been confused by or anything like that, or if I said anything tonight that made no sense, please put it in the chat or unmute yourself. I'm happy to do what I can to answer your questions.
I don't see anything as of yet. Don't see any chats. Well, that's good if we don't have any questions, because that means you answered it very, very well going forward, where people understand. Do you suggest adding new plants?
Do you suggest adding new plants? It depends on what you've got there. I think the more diversity, the better. So if you have low diversity, adding new plants is great. You know.
All right. I'm sorry. Okay.
You muted me.
Yes, because I wanted to give them opportunity to unmute themselves.
Okay. Oh, such as plantains. Yeah, plantains are a great plant. They have a antimicrobial property. So if cattle sometimes are feeling a little sick, they can find some plantains in the pasture and graze on it and sort of medicate themselves with it. A lot of times that'll just show up in your pastures, but One thing I would do before you go out and buy a bunch of seed is if you don't have a managed grazing system put in, and that is like dividing your pastures and then rotating the livestock throughout the different paddocks. That's what I mean by managed grazing, and allowing those other paddocks that the animals aren't in plentiful time for rest. If you don't have that yet, start there and see what plants come back, because you will have a seed bank in your soil of all kinds of different things. And so if you give the plants time to rest, some of there you might have a lot of plants just sprout up from your pastures without having to go out and buy seed. So that's what I would start with if possible. And then if you don't have if you're not seeing the diversity that you would like, then go ahead and add some plants. Another trick that I've heard for adding diversity to pastures is buying hay from like native prairie, if you can find it, or really diverse pastures or hay fields, people that have really good diverse hay fields. And then rolling out the bales, if they're round bales, to feed them. And then it'll seed, all those seeds that are baled up in the hay bales will add diversity as you're feeding hay as a sort of byproduct. So that's another way you can add plants.
So
Let's
I have a
see.
question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, so I know you're talking about pasture grazing, but my question is dealing with like mixed and integrated farming for, I guess, like small farms, like urban farms. So I use cover crops for, I guess, the winter when I'm letting the soil kind of rest. I guess my question more so is, do you have a preference, or could you explain the difference between just chopping and dropping or crimping instead of chopping and dropping for when I go to sow like a new harvest in springtime?
Um, I think it both chopping and dropping and rolling and crimping are good because they don't remove the plant, they keep it there on the soil. I think some plants, some varieties of cover crops don't terminate when you chop them, as well as they do if you roll and crimp them. So they might sprout back up from the roots if you chop and drop. But it really depends on the plant type and all of that, whether it's winter killed or not. So I think they're both good. I don't have a preference except for making sure that it's not going to become a weed for you later. Felicia, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No. That's a great answer, because it will depend upon the cover crop mix and varieties that you're utilizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there like a balance or a ratio of certain types of cover crops to use, or you recommend?
Again, it depends. I mean, you said you use them in the winter. Different cover crops do different things. So some of them, like legumes, will add nitrogen to your soil. Some of them will be really good at adding biomass, so they grow really fast. Like I know a lot of people, what is it, sorghum sudan grass and ryegrass and things like that. They just create a lot of biomass. And then you can roll and crimp them and get pretty good cover to suppress weeds. So it really depends on what your goals are. A great resource for learning more about the different types of cover crops, is it Green Cover Seed? Is that it, Felicia? The company that sells cover crop seeds? They have a really
Oh,
good website
okay.
that
I use a
talks.
different one.
Oh, you just okay. I'm not promoting that company over others. I don't want to, promote a specific company, but I do know their website just has tons of information. Um, so there might be others out there that have similar information. Felicia, please feel free to share. Because I don't buy cover crop seed from them, and I am not associated with them, but I've read their website and I've learned a lot about the different varieties that are available. So, oh, someone asked, what is roll and crimp? That's a great question. So, with cover crops, a big challenge is terminating them, killing the plant when you're done with it. And some people till it in, and that can work. But if we're trying to minimize tillage, one way to do it is through this implement that people have invented called a roller crimper. And it's kind of like a steamroller that you attach to a tractor, except that it's got these sort of zigzag patterns. So it presses the plant down and then crimps the stems so that it kills the plant and doesn't allow it to grow. So it is an implement that you'd have to purchase, and they have them in all different scales. Some people invent their own. I've seen this crazy video of two people. I don't remember how they did it, but they, on a very small scale, crimped their cover crop with like a 2x6 on some ropes, and they just stomped on it to stomp the cover crop down. That works on a smaller scale. I would not do that on a large scale. Oh, Rodale Institute link in the chat. That's a great
Great.
roller crimper blueprints, so you can make one yourself if you're handy.
I wanted to chime in for Mr. Bruce. SARE.org, SARE.org, have a cover crop book, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a lot of information out there where you can learn what is ideal for where you are in the country and so forth. So Nina, I'm gonna help with the questions to kind of get us moving along. We had a question, what are good ways to measure soil health in the field? And what are farmers friendly ways to assess soil health?
Great questions. So in the field, just using, your eyes and your powers of observation without buying any fancy tools, just getting out there and digging down a foot or two if you're really motivated, but a foot would do. And looking at that soil structure, does it have those crumbs? Some people say it looks like dark cottage cheese, or I like the chocolate cake analogy because that sounds tastier. But it should have that loose, crumbly structure. And that is a major sign of soil health because it shows, because you don't get that structure without biological activity. It is the soil food web and that activity of all of those little critters that we can't see that build those soil crumbs. And that allows the soil to infiltrate water, which is enormously important. And it allows the soil to breathe. And, plant roots need oxygen to survive. So if they can't get oxygen, the plants are going to suffer. And so that's a really important thing to look for in the soil. Looking for earthworms again is really good. I think going out in the rain and seeing what happens when it rains is really good. Seeing how the water's moving, how fast is it infiltrating? There's another infiltration test you can do with a ring that you hammer into the soil. You can use a coffee can with the top and bottom removed. Hammer it into the soil and pour water in it. And this is not like a scientific study, but it can tell you something about your soil if you do that and see how fast that water infiltrates. If it takes forever, then your soil doesn't have that structure that it needs to be healthy. So those are some clues. Also looking at how your plants are doing. If your plants are thriving and growing well, then that's a good sign. If they're struggling, if they're stunted, if they're yellowing, or sometimes they turn purple if they don't have the right nutrients. If you just have a bunch of weeds instead of the desired plants, Those are all signs, you know, that your soil is either doing well if you've got healthy plants or struggling. And then there's a bunch of different soil tests out there that you can do, that you can send your soil off to have tested, but but they vary widely. And so I would suggest checking out some of our ATTRA publications on those, and seeing what fits your needs if you're like, because they can be expensive. They can be free. Sometimes the university's extension services have, some of them offer free soil testing or very low cost soil testing. But some of the other ones can be expensive. So I would do your research before investing in soil tests. Let's
Yes.
see.
So-
NRCS does now
Oh.
have approved specific tests for soil health. Oh yeah, NRCS has great
Mhm.
information now on their website about soil health specifically. They've really honed in on that in the recent years. So thank you for reminding me about that.
So
Whoever made that comment.
we do have some questions about cover crop. I wanted to remind everyone, this is a 3-part series, and we have cover crop next Tuesday, February 1st, 6 p.m. On Zoom. And so if you don't mind, if we can hold those questions to then, hopefully I'll be answering those in the presentation. If not, re-ask it. We have a question, Nina, do you ever recommend berms?
Oh, to like to slow down water flow,
To
like
hose the
on
water,
yeah.
because she was saying hopefully their soil is holding water to create good health for them, but do you ever recommend that?
I think it would really depend on the terrain, how steep the slope was. I'd think about it really hard before putting them in. The only downside I've really heard with them is that the like downhill side of the berm can sometimes dry out. And so that like down slope of the berm itself, the soil can suffer a little bit. But that's the only downside. And I don't know if that would, I think it would really depend on the circumstances. I would ask if you have access to an NRCS technician that can do field visits. Sometimes they can come out and see if that would make sense for you. Yeah, it really depends.
Great. Last question that I see, and of course people can unmute, but who is the best person to contact in Fayetteville, Arkansas for soil tests and grants? So it's a twofold question.
Twofold. So best person to contact in Fayetteville, Arkansas for soil tests. That would be, I would go through the U of A extension service. I'm trying to think who the extension agent is. You are always welcome to talk to me about soil tests in general. If you've done a soil test and need help interpreting it, I'm happy to give that a go. And for grants, that's a big old other topic. It depends on what you're trying to get done. So I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to talk to, you're welcome to email me or call me to get more details about that, of what you're looking for. But I'm trying to think who else NCAT has an office here in Fayetteville. So we have a few different specialists that could help with the grant question. Trying to think who at U of A, Ryan Neal might be a good person to reach out to about soil tests. He's with the U of A, the extension service. I'm trying to think who else around here. But yeah, start with me. I'm happy to try and help.
Definitely. And so I think that's the last question we have, but I wanted to make sure everyone knows, again, this is a 3-part series. February 1st, February 8th are the other 2. Cover crop will be covered next Tuesday, and the final we'll have one of our clients, and that will be coming on of Ryer Farms. He is doing what most of the farmers are trying to do for us. He's raising heritage breed cattle, and he sells it as a beef product. And he does it within, I believe he is calling it possibly a meat CSA, but he has clientele that he delivers and so forth. So basically proof in the pudding. We have Jody from Ryer Farms coming to speak with everyone. Also, we are really promoting our soil for water. I'm gonna put that in the chat. Please check out that website. We are promoting it because, one, we have some participants in our session tonight. That's a part of that, but we want all of you all to be a part of it. It is pertaining to soil, regardless if you're a livestock producer or a vegetable producer. You can sign up for the newsletter if you're a vegetable producer at this time, because we're honing in on livestock producers for our project the next 3 years. But you definitely can go sign up at soilforwater.org. And it is for FOR spelled out. And you can go there and sign up for our newsletter, and it will become a nationwide network eventually. That is the goal. But we're specifically working with states now, and we have a great program in the state of Mississippi. And like I said, we have some of our participants on the call tonight, but please look up that. We got several projects this year that's pertaining to soil for water. And one of them is starting April 1st, April 2nd in Okolona, Mississippi. So the other website that I'm gonna put in the chat is our event page, where you can go to NCAT.org/events. And that's where you can keep up with us, what all NCAT staff is doing, and see, is it in your neck of the woods? If it's in person, and of course, if it's on Zoom, we welcome you all the time. So I think we are coming to our hour, but we thank you so much. And Nina, I wanted to give you closing remarks.
Well, I hope I inspired you all to learn more about soil. It's a lifelong journey to learn about soil and farming, and it's so exciting. I'm excited to know that we have this ability to improve our land. You're not stuck with what you got. You can always make improvements, and it's fun. And so please reach out to me at any time. My easiest to get a hold of at first on email, and then we can schedule a call. But if you have follow-up questions, or if you ever need help with a soil related issue or livestock, just please, I'm available to help you with any questions that you have. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. This has been really fun for me. I hope you've taken away some good ideas, something to think about.
Definitely.
Vancouver Island. Wow. Okay.
I saw that. Thank you, Mr. Kevin, for joining us too. We thank everyone. I know it's far and wide. I saw some names I recognized, and
Austin,
some
Texas.
definitely
Nice.
new. So thank you all for joining us this evening. And please check out our NCAT.org/events so you can see the other opportunities we have within NCAT. We have quite a few, and they will definitely help you with your farm. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thanks again, Nina. We always appreciate you.
Thank you, Felicia.
Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.